before we started, but I want to welcome you. My name is Megan, and I am here to share what I've been studying and learning about contemplative traditions. Before we start, if anyone has any experience or questions or insight, reason you're here, if you'd like to share anything before we start, I'd love to hear it. If not, that's okay. But any burning questions before we go on? I'll talk a bit again about what I've been studying, and then we will do a guided meditation today. So you'll have a chance to experience some mindfulness meditation. So why am I here talking to you about contemplative traditions? 3 years ago, actually this month, I left. I had a corporate marketing job. That was a great job. I'd done it for a while, and I didn't see myself there in that seat, that desk, literally, in the 5 years later. So due to kind of a series of events and opportunities, I decided to leave that and do a summer immersion yoga teacher training. And the reason I ended up with yoga is that it had always been, even though I couldn't necessarily articulate what it was, a source of kind of calm, a way that I could center. And I thought, a way I can contribute, and I was 45 at the time, thinking, how can I contribute to this world other than trying to sell people things, really, was part of it. I wanted to share that. So in it also, my family is here, Matt and Whitney, who you might recognize Whitney from Chapel Choir. Put her on the spot. She was 9 at the time, so it was also about our family having a more balanced day-to-day. So I embarked on the summer immersion, loved it, started teaching right away, and I teach 5 to 8 classes a week. I've done that for 3 years or so. And what happened as I got into it was I realized that as important as the physical parts of yoga are, I mean, I am stronger, I am more flexible, and I see that happen with my students. What I love is how I feel. And I don't pretend to know how my students feel, but I see a calm and a centering, what I believe is happening after a class. So I got more and more curious about that and about the ancient tradition of yoga. And so I searched and searched and searched, and I've always loved school, and I thought, how can I study this beyond something I'd get from a yoga teacher training class? How can I look at this academically? So ended up finding a program that I could customize in history and culture, and I set out to study Indian philosophy, which is quite a topic, and rich and diverse and hard because of the language and translation, and I realized, no, that's not it. I mean, yoga fits in there, but I realized as I learned more that it was the contemplative nature of the practice that I was most interested in. And lo and behold, there's an emerging academic discipline, very much a new thing, within the study of religion called contemplative studies. So I was able to tailor my program to that. I've been in it about a year. I'll write my master's thesis in the fall. And it's just been an incredible journey. And what I have loved is learning about the diverse landscape of the way that people connect, whether that's with their God or nature or themselves in a sense of something greater. So I'm excited to talk to you, share a little bit more about that today. I want to start by just talking about what contemplative means. In a good old-fashioned look-up in the dictionary, it tells contemplation is a concentration on spiritual things as a form of spiritual devotion, a state of mystical awareness of God's being, an act of considering with attention and study, the act of regarding steadily, intention and expectation. So lots of definitions, and I think I like starting with that definition because the landscape of contemplative traditions is certainly aspects of the great religions of the world, but it's also something we're discovering all the time and understanding how it can fit into our lives. So a contemplative practice refers to various approaches, disciplines, and methods for developing attentiveness, awareness, compassion, concentration, presence, wisdom, and the like. I would also say connection and stillness could be part of that definition. It includes, again, not only religiously committed and tradition-based methods, but also ecumenical methods, spiritual and secular ones. It can also mean an approach to things, and this could be an approach to education. It can be an approach to art, dance, writing, photography included, theater, walking, I would say gardening, being in nature, hiking. There's something I just want to share and as a resource if you want to learn more. This is called the Tree of Contemplative Practices. I had a presentation set up and we don't have the projector, which is A-okay, but I wanted to be sure to show you this and let you know that the site for the Contemplative Mind in Societies, where you can learn more about the Tree of Contemplative Practices, which is just a diverse collection of the ways that people embark on such a practice.
Could you read some of those?
I sure can. So different types: movement, dance, yoga, labyrinth walking, walking meditation, ritual or cyclical, establishing a sacred or personal space, retreats, ceremonies and rituals based on spiritual or cultural traditions, relational, deep listening, storytelling, council circle, dialogue, activist, pilgrimage to areas where social justice issues are highlighted, work and volunteering, vigils and marches, bearing witness. I feel like this is an appropriate area to highlight, especially for this congregation. Creative, contemplative arts, journaling, music and singing, and generative, mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, beholding, and finally stillness, silence, centering, quieting the mind, and meditation.
I'm surprised Tai Chi isn't on there.
Well, you know what it is?
Oh, it is?
It is, yes. So, talked a little bit about contemplative practices. So, a tradition, of course, is a pattern, a transmission of beliefs and practices, rituals from one generation or culture to the next. And of course, contemplative traditions are historically rooted in an expression of religious traditions: Buddhist, Christian, Confucian, Taoist, Hindu, Islamic, Jain, Jewish, and Sikh. All of these major religions have a contemplative tradition, a practice, and is often considered part of the mystical traditions of these world religions. And as noted really with that tree of contemplative practices, there are secular traditions, spiritualists, technological even, that may have some sort of distant relation to religious tradition, and I would say mindfulness meditation is one of those that ultimately is probably rooted in Buddhist meditation, but has taken on a different form today. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, transcendental meditation, therapeutic meditation. So the landscape is rich. And that's almost so big it's kind of hard to wrap one's mind around. But yet what I've just found has been fascinating is finding those common threads and celebrating the differences too, but recognizing that across cultures, for different reasons, people historically have been drawn to finding that connection or center. So I'm going to highlight just a few traditions. This is by no means exhaustive. And what you won't hear me talking about is technique, because I think that trying to explain a technique might diminish the beauty and meaning of it, especially if it's not my tradition. What I've chosen to highlight, I'll talk a little bit about the Black Church, Taoist meditation, Quaker silent prayer, which of course is Christian, Sufi contemplation, yoga, and therapeutic meditation, or the relaxation response, which you may be familiar with. The Black Church, there's a wonderful book called Joy Unspeakable by Barbara Holmes that is about the contemplative practices of the Black Church, rooted, of course, in African tradition. And she notes that in studying the Black Church, believe that meditation and contemplation may be different in that arena. Meditation being a reflective process, a thoughtful engagement with text, spirit, and religious experience, repetition of sacred words and phrases, rhythmic calls to worship. And there are probably not surprises in those definitions there, but I think that rhythmic call to worship is a really special element to that tradition. And within the Black Church, contemplation invites us to enter into beingness, into a space where listening, repose, and receptivity dominate. So just a few highlights there. And again, it's a wonderful book. Wonderful book. I would highly recommend that. Moving to sort of the other side of the globe, China and Taoism, which dates back to between the 4th and 2nd century BCE, before Christ. Meditation is an emptiness-based form of meditation that leads to transformative experiences that have a foundational dimension of being contentless, non-conceptual, and non-dualistic. That emptiness-based tradition. Ancient texts advocate a form of inward training or inner cultivation. Practitioners enter a state of stillness, a state that some identify as one's innate nature, as the Tao manifesting in one's being. Quaker silent prayer. Quakerism arose in the mid-17th century. The quiet, receptive frame of the soul is the highest form of spiritual practice in the literature of the tradition. Practitioners sought to let go of all conscious thought and activity, to renounce one's own will, so only the will of God remained. In this state of stillness, one could experience pure love and union with God. So very different, yet some common themes there. Sufi contemplation involves cultivating love and becoming truly human, realizing that one is ultimately a total reflection of God's names and attributes. Wholeness is a human being's natural state. There are physical aspects in Sufi contemplation. Color visualization of the body's subtle energy centers are one. Another is the devotional dance of what are referred to in a Western description are the whirling dervishes, which is a way of becoming closer to God. There is a development in Sufi contemplation from lesser to greater sophistication. And Sufi contemplation, I should just, forgive me if this goes without saying, but that is part of Islam. Classical Hindu yoga. I have shared that I am a yoga teacher and have experience studying American yoga, which I think is important to distinguish, and that could be hours of discussion with the differences there, but I'm going to highlight a bit about classical Hindu yoga, which is part of Hindu history. It's sort of interwoven in Hinduism, and is not necessarily about how the body moves into positions. It's a path of meditation aimed at liberation, including rigorous discipline and concentration. The Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which is dating back to before 400 CE, so after Christ, is seen as the first written account of the yoga system. It includes 8 limbs, which are restraints and observances, so relating to behavior, posture, the poses, breath control, pranayama is what it's referred to in yoga, prana, the energy, life force energy, sensory withdrawal, focused concentration, meditative absorption, and bliss or enlightenment. And depending on the historian and the author, a devotion to God can be part of that as well. And again, in American yoga, that is extracted from the tradition, but it's important to note that bliss or enlightenment could also, for some, be considered a connection with the one. And I just want to read a few phrases that are a translation from Sanskrit of the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which I think do a great job of sort of setting the stage for what the practitioner is on the road to achieving. Yoga is the settling of the mind into silence. When the mind has settled, we are established in our essential nature, which is unbounded consciousness. And then finally, what I'll highlight is therapeutic meditation and the relaxation response. And this is absolutely switching gears, and I think it's important to highlight this because here in 2018, meditation, stillness, mindfulness, the physical response of the body is something that often tends to be part of that conversation, which is very important. That hasn't been something that I've studied. My background is humanities, it's not science. It's fascinating to me. And it's exciting to me that mind-body medicine is more and more prominent. I would say this could be considered a new tradition. It's certainly a secular tradition. Very different category than these ancient traditions, but important, and it could be considered emerging. Relaxation response was developed by an American cardiologist and mind-body pioneer. His name is Herbert Benson. He lives today. Relaxation response, his book was published in 1975 and describes a step-by-step relaxation technique and stress management therapy, as well as corresponding physiological states identified as the relaxation response, which, to break it down, a very simple explanation is it's a decrease in the overall metabolism of the body. So the heart rate decreases, the blood pressure lowers, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, which is very different than our sympathetic nervous system that is fight or flight. So the body calms, stress relief, stillness. So a quick overview of some incredibly deep and beautiful traditions, which I'm just so excited to share. Does anyone have any questions about what I've shared? I don't pretend to be an expert on the individual traditions, but has anyone noticed themes there that jump out at them, if you'd like to share?
How it affects the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did she say how it affects the body?
Yeah, and I think too, whether and the means of devotion or the why differ, but that stillness that tends to be a common theme with the religious traditions, the stillness and connection. I think is beautiful. So, should we do a meditation? Yes. I want to honor the time that we committed to for the talk, and I'll just say that I'm more than happy if you'd ever like to discuss this more, or if you have questions you think of later, I'm more than happy to chat about it, and I have some books that I've found to be very valuable. So I am a resource for anyone that's interested. So we're going to do...
Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because people are probably aware, you certainly are, the University of Minnesota has a Center for Spirituality and Healing, and they teach these 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction courses, one of which was held at the HP Como Clinic I keep waiting for the health partners or others to also contribute to these, because they're kind of expensive. But it's a really good idea.
It is a really good idea. It's exciting. We're really just at the start, I think, aren't we? So I'm hopeful. But to your point, there needs to be a shift.
Yeah. They
Um,
have it at the U, it's amazing.
Yes, we're lucky that it's here. So this is based on a meditation by John Kabat-Zinn, who is an important figure in transcendental meditation, which is a modern evolution of, it could be described as a modern evolution of what was a Hindu practice of mantra repetition. So that is his background. This is not that. This is about being present. It's about visualization as well. I tend to teach a lot. I teach a mindfulness yoga class, and it is about learning how to practice mindfulness, which is a journey. So, before I begin, let me say with that if your mind is elsewhere during this meditation, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means that's where your mind is today. And we're learning. And if you're interested in it, I would encourage you to try again. And you could find guided meditation online. I'm happy to provide them as well. But I just want to stress, you can't do it wrong. Before we begin, I would just settle into your seat. You want to be comfortable. Maybe both feet on the floor if that's comfortable, perhaps hands on the lap. Close your eyes if that's comfortable. If it's not, that's okay. If you prefer to have them open, I would soften your gaze and maybe look down. And then let's begin to pay attention to our breath and just notice where in our body our breath is moving on its own before we influence it. And we don't have to label how it feels. Just notice where your body's moving. And now let's begin to match the length of our inhalations and exhalations. And it can just be by feeling. You don't have to count. If you'd like to count, you absolutely can. Just keeping in mind, it's not about achieving a length, it's just about a rhythm matching. And then we can let that equal part breath go. In yoga, we call that samavriti if we're inclined to use Sanskrit. And now we're going to transition or kind of play with the belly breath before I begin the meditation. And what that means is we want to allow our belly to soften and expand as we breathe in. And then as we exhale, the belly button gently comes back in the direction of the spine, and we empty the lungs. So what that does is it helps to create space for our diaphragm to work its magic and invite in a nice, deep, nourishing breath. That may be hard for you, and that's okay. That's not how kids and animals breathe that way. As adults, it tends to travel up and come from our chest. But I would encourage you to stick with it and revisit it. It can be a practice we can do at any time. Helps to calm the body. So continuing with that belly breath, and if that's too much for you to focus on now, just nice, deep, long inhalations following with a slow exhalation. Allowing the awareness to rest with the sensations of the breath, the gentle rhythm it's creating within you. Letting it be as it is. Each inhale and exhale announcing the next. Expand your awareness to the sensations of your body. Sitting upright with dignity, bring your attention to the surface beneath you, and the support it provides. Root your body into its strength and become aware of your connection to it. Complete, whole, and in this moment, you are grounded by its unwavering resolve. As you sit there, visualize a grand mountain whose peaks pierce smoky clouds and continue upward where the air is clear and the view is endless. A mountain with slopes that are both jagged and gentle, supported by a vast foundation, rooted deep in the bedrock of the earth. This mountain is a monument to all that is solid, grand, unmoving, and beautiful. Are there trees? Does the snow blanket its lofty heights? Perhaps waterfalls cascading as mist into an open sky? However it is, let the mountain be as it is, a perfect creation. Be this mountain and share in its stillness. Grounded in your posture, your head is its skyward peak, supported by the rest of your form, granting you an awe-inspiring perspective of the landscape before you, the landscape behind you and about you, which flows from your center into the distant horizon. Be this mountain and take on its stability as your own, from the top of your crown, down your neck, and into the balance of your shoulders, like cliffs, descending into your arms and forearms and coming to rest in the valley of your hands. Be the mountain. Your feet, legs, and hips its base, solid and rooted beneath you, a foundation extending up your spine and abdomen, a core of stability. The rhythm of your breath is all that moves you, a living mountain, alive and aware, yet unwavering in inner stillness, completely what you are, beyond words and thought, a centered, grounded, unmovable presence. A mountain which witnesses the sun travel across the sky, casting light and shadows and color across its consistent composure. Moment by moment, in the mountain's stillness, the surface teems with light and activity. Snows melt, streams run down its face, trees and flowers bloom and die and bloom again, as the wildlife returns and departs with the seasons. Be the mountain, who will be called beautiful and inspiring, and dark and ominous, and knows that it is all of those things and less. Be the mountain, which sits and sees how night follows day and back again, which knows the sun by the warmth it brings on rising, and the stars by the way they show in a darkened sky. Through it all, the mountain sits, aware of the changes that each moment brings around it and to it, yet it remains itself, still as the seasons flow one into the other, and the air swirls from hot and cold, and the weather turns from tame to turbulent, some so treacherous as to tear at its surface. Still, none of this concerns the mountain, whose serenity is housed within and cannot be disturbed by fleeting furor. In the same way as you sit in meditation, you can learn to experience the mountain as a means to embody the same centered, unwavering stillness and groundedness in the face of all that changes in your life over seconds and hours and years. Like the mountain, you will experience the changing nature of your mind and body and the world around you. You will have periods varying in intensity, of darkness and light, of activity and inactivity, and moments that fill your life with color. Through it all, be the mountain and call on its patient strength and stability within you. Let it empower you to encounter each moment with mindful composure and compassionate clarity. You may want to gently wiggle your fingers and toes, taking your time to open your eyes if they've closed. And notice how you feel. Well, thank you everyone for being here.
The nuns all died off and lay people were running it, and now, I don't know, it's closed.